Start recording? Yeah, that's fine. No, it's just like to set up to do Chrome. Must be some other internet. Oh yeah.
Mostly when I get a job, honestly, I just need to make money.
Why does everyone say that? Like, I asked me. Je viens d'expliquer que nous, on n'est pas de préférence aussi. Du coup, c'est comme ça que ça marche en fait. Quand t'as 21, you kind of meet people for other people. That's the beauty of it. It's about connections, friendships. And people care about that.
And then like with the years of experience, I guess you choose what you actually like. So like at the start,
La bonne qualité d'amis. Ouais, c'est
like you might go down a different path than you originally wanted. Yeah, but I'm like creativity, so marketing is
En plus, ça dit
Okay, let's begin. This was a video filmed about 6 years ago. Now, I was making the distinction between human security and national security. Okay, we'll come back to that at the conclusion. So, human security would ask the following question. Watch the following video. This is a young Afghan girl. The video was taken about, if I'm not mistaken, I think 6 years ago. Okay.
I'm sorry, could you share the screen, please?
Okay.
C'est quoi, mais quoi?
نام تو چیه؟
روشن
روشن
تیم که اول مطب مرو
بسیار خوب چی میکنی حالی؟ چی میکنی؟
ولی گندنه بگرو
خب پخته میکنی؟
پخته؟ ای پخته نموشه خودنیه
دیگه چی خوش داری؟
دیگه مول سرخک
مول سرخک
دیگه چیزی نه ما باغن داریم
خب در کجا؟
در تکر
اوه بسیار خوب است در باغ چی باشه؟
ما پرید
دیگه؟
دیگه نوک باشه دیگه چیزی نباشه
میوه و ترکاری برای صحت خوب است؟
خوب است ما این قصه نیالشان داریم بازدوره زردالو هم داره
خب خیلی خوب است خیلی خوب است این بگات چقدر جمع میکنی؟
پیاز
همین چقدر گندنک جمع میکنی؟
کم جمع کنم
نشان بده نشان
اینقدر جمع کنم اینقدر جمع کنم بازم میبرم
اینجا
از اونجا
آرام بگیرم همین حالی تا خود دشت تکر میری پس؟
نمیرم
کجا؟
دشت تکر نمیرم پس یک بلوکدر میشونم باز وقتی خوب که چی شد تربا شد برف تزخ میرم و این یاده چیه؟ تایلو و اینجا احمدی آمدم اینجا این الغم میگیرم قدر خوردگی خواهم بابدیم
خب والله ايش ما انو داعي لغت
یک وطن دارم. آدم عبدالحمد نام داره و هم چینی نام داره.
ها خیلی خوب چند برادر داری
برادر؟
اه.
هیچ ندارم و هم کرد مرد.
نه
با مو قرآن مرد.
نه
مرد کرد مرد.
چند خور داری
خوش سبزی نست، خورشیدی نست، زرغونه است، دیگه بسیده است. وقتی بود دیگه خورمه ناخونشون خوب کاری بود تایدر گشت.
خوب درد بخوان خود در مکتب سنفی اول خب
این شبانم من.
بسیار خوب است خوب درد بخوان خود آینده چی میخوای کشی آینده چی میخوای کشی
ای معلم
اوه
معلم شو میخوایم. معلم ما خوب معلم است.
بله
برم
آره
و کار نفتاد. کارشنزین بودم و کار نگیدی نمیشه.
خدا حافظ
Okay. I've been showing this video for years. Probably 88 of those views are mine. I've been using this Afghan girl as a prop for years. You see, from 1996 to 2001, when the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, that girl could have never dreamed of being a teacher. Not only that, that girl couldn't have gone outside like that, uncovered to collect those vegetables. The girl's ability to dream came about because of the 2001 invasion and the overthrow of the Taliban. Now, when I say I was using her as a prop for all these years, the question then I would ask is the following. So in that case then, surely in this case, the war was just, wouldn't you say? If this war gave the ability of a single individual girl to dream about the future, can I say from a philosophical and ethical stance, war is just in this case? The 2001 invasion of Afghanistan. Yes?
I mean, if you look at it from the ethical point of view, because of the war, now she has a chance to dream.
Okay.
An alternative ethical point of view. If you look at it kind of from a utilitarian point of view, it's unclear whether it would be justified or not, because you have to weigh up the amount of people who got benefits versus the ones who
Okay, so
got
very good, a
benefits.
very Mill's argument. And then my answer would be this. It's a trick question. The trick question is this: we have to ask ourselves, how did the Taliban emerge in the first place? And the Taliban emerged in the first place because the US did not for human security. You see, the Taliban emerged amongst what? Displaced Afghan refugees in the refugee camps of Pakistan. You see, from a national security perspective, the US wanted the Soviets out of Afghanistan during their occupation from 1980 to 1989. To that end, the US invested billions of dollars to help the Afghan rebels known as Mujahideen expel the Soviets. The minute the Soviets left, what did the US do? Well, absolutely nothing. For a fraction of the billions of dollars spent on the weapons, if they invested on refugee relocation programs, reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan, and finally an Afghan peace process, because there were 7 different rebel groups, the Taliban would have never emerged in the first place, you see. But you see, all of that, that's human security. And that's what the US really never prioritized. The question isn't, was the war just? The question is, how did the Taliban emerge in the first place? This poor girl, I've been using her as a prop for that exercise. And remember, over all of these years, what could I say? She had the possibility of becoming a teacher. Now, as I speak to you now, this girl who's now grown up, maybe reached puberty, does she have those same possibilities? Absolutely. Okay, so this girl is also a demonstration of intersectionality, where not only does being a woman disadvantage her, she comes from a particular minority group in Afghanistan. I don't know if any of you have ever read the book, The Kite Runner, or seen the film. There's a minority there referred to the Hazara. They look physically different. You see, she almost had Asiatic features. So in terms of the intersectionality, not only as a girl, that's not probably a woman, she's denied the ability to dream, but then she suffers the other. But suffers from another problem that's just simply an accident of birth. She belongs to this ethnic community that's heavily persecuted by the Taliban. This is where I begin with this particular story. Not enough attention is paid to human security aspects. This is the big picture. A group like yours, what is it trying to address? It's this element. So, before let's look at human security is basically saying, again, how will vulnerable populations be protected? I want you to look basically at an image like this. And then let's go to the following. This is 2009. What is happening here? You see, we're now starting to pay attention to women in Afghanistan and girls in Afghanistan. But the other argument I want to make is this has always been a problem. What is happening here, I would argue, is akin to whether it's the use of child soldiers, the trafficking of girls as sex workers. Or the following phenomena is all the same. What is a child soldier? It is more or less a boy who is being used like a commodity, basically as a weapon. A boy is more or less a drone. Give a boy a gun and he doesn't disobey orders, you program him like a drone. Women who are sexually trafficked. That is an example. You're treating a girl like a narcotic. In the sense you're charging it is cruel to say, but this is how it's working. You're charging a rent on a commodity that has no agency. In this case, why is this 11-year-old girl being married off to this person here? It is because he paid money for the family. He's paid the dowry. This was an issue of poverty in Afghanistan. Even after the Taliban were removed. Problem for Afghan girls, sure they were having the ability to dream like that one Afghan girl, but other Afghan girls were entering ninth. Which then gets to now, how do we think of this issue? This is an issue of patriarchy. The Taliban was what? It was a political unit that implemented a form of patriarchy throughout Afghanistan. Basically, they say we control the state. In the name of the state, girls and women cannot go outside unaccompanied by a male, nor could they get an education. Basically, they were denied a role in public life. That's patriarchy of the state. The Taliban were overthrown, you see. But you see, a military invasion cannot erase this, the patriarchy that's in a culture and a society. Number one, the new government technically was not strong enough to prevent marriages like this. How is this cultural patriarchy? There's nothing wrong in this culture for this 4-year-old man to pay money for this 11-year-old girl. That's the problem. That a military invasion cannot destroy. Here's another example of cultural patriarchy. A 55-year-old man being married to an 8-year-old girl. Oh, 2005. Look at this. Picture was taken on September 10th. This picture was taken on September 11th. Ironically, on the anniversary of the day that set these events in motion, overthrowing of the Taliban. October 14th, 2010. Are we seeing? Now, look at this. This girl here at 17, okay, she was forced to marry at age 11. So you have to imagine probably endured about 6 years or 5 years of hell. She ran away. Now, where did she find refuge? In a woman's shelter. It is highly unlikely such support networks are going to be allowed by the Taliban. So the Taliban, basically, what did they return to us? The new patriarchs of the state. They just simply come back. And what have they eliminated? The cultural institutions that fight cultural patriarchies. Another one, this association. This was an NGO in 2004. Moni was sold by her father at age 11 to a 60-year-old man, in this case, for 2 boxes of heroin. In other words, another narcotics. Like I said, what is it? It's a commodity. But so was his daughter became a commodity as well. It was simply a barter, do you see here? Now you see, what do I say? The US or basically international relations doesn't prioritize human security. The US could have put pressure on the Afghan government to do more about this. But politics is usually the realm of men and is usually the realm of national security. And issues get forgotten like this. The whole reason I just wanted to say, there was a problem girls faced in Afghanistan even before the Taliban. Now we're going to see is the future is going to be compounded, only made worse. But I also have to remind you, this is not just a problem in a Muslim country. In this village in India, this is a Hindu wedding. 5-year-old is roused to sleep, okay, for this ceremony. And again, remember, this young girl is being promised to this boy because there is some financial exchange at stake. This is an issue that has nothing to do with Islam. It's an issue of poverty. The use of the prevalence of child marriage. Now, the same in Nepal. Again, not a Muslim country. Okay. And in this case, this is a 16-year-old now protesting for forced marriage. And whether it's that Afghan girl I showed you the video or this picture here, this is really the issue I want to highlight. This is a problem of socioeconomic conditions in these various countries. Okay. But I just want to put the fate of girls in Afghanistan in a greater global picture. What are we talking about in this case is the ability of girls to even imagine a future where they could get an education. This is one individual case. The tragedy in Afghanistan is this denial of the ability to dream about the future has been now implemented across the entire nation. Of course, in a case like we could say in India, at least in Rajasthan, for example, of course, this is not every girl in India, right? But the point is to show you that this is a global problem. I want to conclude with this person here. This is another Malala who doesn't get as much attention as the Malala from Pakistan. That young girl we saw in the video wanted to grow up and become a teacher. I wondered what this Malala dreamt about. Did she dream about being a police officer? Unless they were needed. Okay. The minute she becomes a police officer, what is she doing? She is an agent on behalf of the state, right? She represents the state. And at the end of the day, now this is when the Taliban was overthrown and they were operating from the mountains. But do you see how the Taliban never went away? This was a problem. Yeah, she was eventually killed by the Taliban. Well, this is what the Taliban represents. So, what can we say about it? Let's look what happened in August. In August, the US decided from a national security perspective, we no longer need to be in Afghanistan. We invaded 20 years ago to prevent Al-Qaeda from launching attacks on us. And basically the Biden administration made, well, it was actually the Trump administration made the decision that an Al-Qaeda-like attack from the soil of Afghanistan can be something that we can prevent without our forces being there. So the US withdrew. In other words, what did the US do? It was a very cold calculation. Since we can guarantee our national security, the fate of every single woman or girl in Afghanistan is no longer a problem. We are going to leave Afghanistan knowing pretty well the Taliban has a chance of seizing the country and dictating the future of every Afghan girl. You see what happened there? National security was prioritized over human security. Now, what do I say that this has been a constant problem in international relations? What do they say in the late 1980s? What happened? Again, the national security objective of the US was achieved, the Soviets withdrew. And the minute that happened, they completely ignored the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan. That's where the Taliban came from. So we say, what are the origins of the Taliban? The late 1980s, when really the US and the world, we have to say, and NATO and the UN, did not care about the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan. You see in the late 1980s, here we are in 2021, the ramifications of those events. Nobody could have anticipated. What's going to happen now? In 1996, when the Taliban took over Kabul, nobody could have anticipated a small group in the mountains of Jalalabad launching an attack against New York City and Washington, D.C., and bringing a superpower into a war for 20 years. Nobody could have anticipated that. From this perspective, I can ask, what are the consequences of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan? We can't know. I'm just showing you the big picture. But one thing I can guarantee is this, in a single day, once Kabul fell, that's it, that's the capital. The state is now in the hands of the Taliban. The fate of every Afghan girl and woman was sealed. Which then brings us to an overall picture. What is your club trying to do? From a theoretical perspective. For me, it's theoretical. For every single one of you here is applied. And it says a lot that there isn't a single male who joined this class. It says a lot. So that's what I'm saying. For me, it's theoretical. For every single one of you, this is something applied. You lived it. This is really a lecture on patriarchy. Girl up fights patriarchy. Because for girls to advance, they have to navigate patriarchal structures. Every single one of these things I've showed you, the child marriages, the Taliban's ability to dictate if a girl can go and collect vegetables or become a teacher, that's all patriarchy. The thing about patriarchy is this. Patriarchy, we use it as an abstract noun. That has to change. That's the first thing. That's what I'm saying. Theoretically, this is all a theory for me. Because it's something I developed, an idea after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Do you remember one very famous quote by RBG? When will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? She was asked. And she goes, when there are 9 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court, that will be enough. And the people who asked were shocked. And she goes, nobody is surprised when there's 9 men on the Supreme Court. Why should it cause such a shock when I say that there could be 9 women on the Supreme Court? You see, what was RBG doing on that day? She was challenging a level of patriarchy. The patriarchy of the state. Patriarchy is a system that creates reality. And this is your reality that accrues. It's this. We have to start making patriarchy a verb, because the minute you make it a verb, then you realize what is the agent that is patriarchy. You see, this whole lecture was about how the Taliban patriarchs girls in Afghanistan by denying them a future. Or in other words, what do they call the Taliban? Becomes patriarchs of the state. Patriarchy is a form of power where agents can control the past, present, and future. So like I said, for me, it's theoretical. For every single one of you, you can give me an answer. Who has patriarched you in the past? Who is patriarching you in the present? Who do you anticipate patriarching you in the future? If you have answers to all of those, what does that mean? Patriarchy is a form of power that controls time. If you as a single individual can think of somebody in the past, somebody or an institution that patriarched you, denied you your agency, denied you your aspirations, it's a form of power. In the present, if you can think of somebody or an institution that's doing it, it's a form of patriarchy. If it even affects your dreams, you see, now what did I say? Every Afghan girl can no longer think in the future. You see, this is how I say patriarchy controls mind. If she can't even think in the future about becoming a teacher, that's a form of power. You see, patriarchy is projected. Religion is often a form of patriarchy, but I want to conclude with what we're seeing in Afghanistan is not patriarchy of religion. Because if it's religion, who is patriarchy in Afghanistan? It's not their equivalent of the priests. Because for patriarchy of religion, it's usually a priest who does the patriarchy or the organized church. No, the Taliban is a political force. It's an army with guns that makes it political. This is patriarchy of the state. The state patriarchs. Whether it's Afghanistan, the Afghan state, whether it's the state of Texas. The state of Texas is patriarchy. By passing a law that basically says the state of Texas has the power to dictate what happens in a woman's womb, that's a form of power. That's patriarchy. And then there's the other level, and that is culture. Whether it is, and the culture is this, who is patriarch? In this case, it was her father. Her father basically said, your present and future, I am determining for 2 boxes of heroin. So, on that depressing note, this is where I conclude. And what can we do about it? Well, no, you can't. By being here, just being aware, you see, just from an ethical point of view. Because when I give these talks, and it's tragic that, of course, when I give these talks, it's generally about patriarchy in general. It's unfortunate that, and I've been giving these lectures at IE on patriarchy for 3 years. It's tragic that there's just now more cases that are even more tragic. I gave one on the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. What can you do is be aware. Because you might not be able to change, but just by coming here and being aware of their plight, empathizing from an ethical perspective, that's the right thing. I saw a lot of you were shocked by this. But just to be exposed to this issue is the right thing to do. Because of course, you're all going to be agents spreading information. From this point onwards, you will take this information and spread it to the future. That's the right thing. And finally, with this kind of framework of analyzing how patriarchy is, apply it to patriarchy all around. Like I said, for every single one of you, this is an applied subject, something you're going to live through, something you're going to live through. Any questions or thoughts?
It's heartbreaking. I mean, I don't know. I was aware of the issue, but I like 8, 11.
It's a lot worse. I cut it by this lecture by half. There's a lot more going on. But like I said, maybe just have maybe this smaller dose is better. It might be better. Good. It should be heartbreaking.
I mean, and also looking like from our point of view, which is so different because we're really lucky to
We are very lucky. I mean,
have an education and to be in, you know, a school where actually the majority of the students that came in at least this year are women. I think there's like a 52% like women and 40-something men, which is, you know, a breakthrough considering women's history through society. And also our reality is so different. I mean, I'm not sure where like the countries you all come from, but I know that you've had the opportunities to come this far and to look at people that don't even have choices. It's just
exactly.
makes me so angry.
I mean, not only you have the choices, but even the mental choice of like projecting the future and say, I could be this, I want to be this, I want to strive to be this. Exactly, that's what's being denied you. Yes.
Sir, in terms of what you said about like national security being prioritized over human security, wouldn't you say that not prioritizing human security can lead to conditions that will compromise national security in the future?
Yes, exactly. That was my argument. You just said it a lot better. You said it very well. Exactly. Not prioritizing human. I'll just give you other examples of human security. Think during the pandemic. Okay. National security. What was that? Closing our borders, making sure nobody who's infected gets in. What would have been the human security calculation? Again, from a gender perspective, who do you think, in terms of a particular working segment of society, who do you think was the population disproportionately affected during the pandemic in terms of caring for patients? Who would what particular segment? Nurses. And from a gender perspective, nurses tend to be women. You see, but from a human perspective, that would have been a human security perspective, right? Did nurses get, first of all, proper equipment in the beginning? Okay, not only that, did they get even, let's say, resources to deal with their mental trauma from all this? I can tell you no. And right now, there's a huge problem of suicide among nurses. You see, that's a failure of human security.
And also, I know that at least in Spain, since the lockdown was so heavy and people were like not allowed to leave their homes, right? There was also a huge increase in domestic
violence. That's the other
which is
example.
so upsetting. as
That
well.
from a human security perspective.
Yeah,
Now,
this is
that was a
Spain, but
mistake.
still.
That was a mistake, absolutely. Now, this is the question. Does the state then provide enough resources to deal with this issue? Okay, because again, the state is usually geared for national security interests, not human security. That was another security failing. Yeah, is when the state thinks of people as individuals who are the most vulnerable during a national security crisis, and then implements measures to address them, then the state would have really implemented human security. Okay, any other questions?
Ibrahim, I have a question.
Yes.
This makes me like so sad. It's obviously really heartbreaking. But I mean, thinking about women in countries where women are really suppressed, like how can the international community like do something? Or like how can, I don't know, other countries or organizations apply pressure for things to actually be better?
Okay, so this we're talking on the macro level. Afghanistan is going to depend on international aid. Okay, so going forward, this is the question. There are some countries that would provide aid with Afghanistan and not really care about this issue. China and Russia usually cares about kind of expediency rather than human rights agenda. Okay, you've never heard, yeah, okay. So what does it remain? It's for other countries not to forget this issue. The thing is, I just want you to think from a general issue, like a perspective, this is a human rights issue then, right? But let's think about this. How good is the international community? Did the international community really stop trading or like force China to end its Uyghur camps? Okay, no. You kind of turn a blind eye to it. As long as Afghanistan prevents Al-Qaeda from, the Taliban prevents Al-Qaeda from forming, do you think the international community is really going to pressure the Taliban to make the conditions of women there better? No, because these issues, the international community prefers expedience opposed to human security. Expediency is enough for national security. It meets national security. Human security has not been really an agenda. It's not really been on the agenda. And we see the problems with that. Did I answer your question, Kiana?
Yeah, it's a sad answer, but yeah.
Sad answer, but just let me think of Kiana's your third year, right? This is your fourth year.
Third.
Classes were focused on these human security issues. How were you? Have you even been introduced to this idea in your classes? Exactly. Exactly. Internationals, that's the problem. This requires not only a rewiring of the whole discipline, okay? But you see the problem why. It is this whole even discipline we're studying is very much focused on kind of national security. We tend to forget the humans involved. Yes.
As they were saying about what the international community can do on a macro level, in similar issues, like often the response from the countries that are not prioritizing human security is that they can't break sovereignty. What would you say to that?
Okay, so that's it. This is an issue of sovereignty. So when I mentioned Russia and China says it's not our business to meddle in the sovereign affairs of the Afghan nation. Yeah. So absolutely, this is an issue of sovereignty. But when we get to issues like this, okay, I'm saying this. If, let's say, this is a country dependent on aid. So that's the problem with the Uyghurs in China, right? China just keeps on saying it's a sovereign issue. And there's very little leverage. The US might impose some sanctions, but still we see very little leverage to China, change China's behavior. With the Taliban, on the other hand, when we can say that this is an entity that depends on international aid, then this is a case where the donor does have the right to say this aid is contingent on what happens to women within your borders. And in other words, are there some cases where violating country sovereignty is ethically called for? I would say yes. In this particular case, yes. I mean, the whole issue of a human rights agenda is you create norms. Now, when we're saying violating sovereignty, what I'm saying is you create norms where that state feels pressure. It's not dictating at gunpoint, treat women better. But states do respond to pressure. Think South Africa. I mean, the whole boycott movement was to get the South African state to do something within its own sovereign borders. It was calling for changing its own behavior, right? In that case, I would say that was fine. That in the South African case was something that should have been done. And in the case of Afghanistan, it should be done as well. Liz?
I was gonna say, like, couldn't this be justified as a reason for like going to war?
Oh, responsibility to protect. So that happened in the past. And so but I'm wondering now, has various international actors learned the lessons of argument? Libya, that justified the war in Libya. So in other words, are you saying could it lead to a slippery slope that leads to war and making the matter only worse?
No, I'm saying there in international law, like with the human rights law and everything, like couldn't countries go to the UN and propose a war and try to, you know, fix the situation?
Oh, sure, from a legal perspective, absolutely. And from the realist perspective, given the case in Libya now, what happened with Libya? Will China and Russia ever allow that to happen? Think of why there was no action in Syria. Really, what prevented was the constant threat of a Chinese and Russian veto of any UN Security Council resolution, allowing any kind of intervention via the UN in Syria. So that's what I'm saying. Legally, of course, it's all in the books. In reality, with the way the UN is structured, and that's the thing. What if there was any UN Security Council resolution that will contend with the Taliban? Will Russia and China ever allow this to happen?
That is what's usually criticized about the United Nations, that political unwillingness that comes from the veto, but the veto is also necessary, otherwise they wouldn't even be part of the conversation. And they're part of the, they're one of the like biggest economies and most powerful countries. So it's a double standard for everything.
And there's a big debate now, is the Security Council obsolete? Or if so, should it be expanded? Either, get rid of it or at least expand it to include other major powers. So that at least you have a balance. But that's different. Other issue. Very good. Any other questions or observations?
What class do you teach?
Okay. So I teach history. Are you first year?
Yes, but I love this.
So I teach history of international relations. So I think you already have another.
We're starting with, we have it right now, history of international relations up to 1945.
So maybe I'll be assigned to your 1945 one.
So next semester?
Maybe, yeah, it's up to the IR gods. I mean, not IR, your department gods to assign me your class.
Unplugged at one point, like we have you now for unplugged.
So they have me for international relations of pandemic.
It's just until fourth year we have the electives.
Yeah, so it's
that's
wild
it,
for but no. And in that class, I do focus a lot on history of children. Yeah, because that really also gets ignored in history as well. How are children affected by the great events of history? Whether it's the Holocaust, World War II, so on and so forth. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully there's a chance. Or political theory. I might have that class.
Okay.
You gotta ask. Just tell if you want. Just ask for it. They usually they treat you like customers. So.
No, if you tell them though, like we want Ibrahim or whatever, they'll give him to you. I swear. Never. No.
Oh, have you requested a professor and they've never responded?
We don't request it with the whole class.
Do you want me to give you the secret?
Yeah.
Say my parents will call. Usually, that usually gets. Yeah. I mean, you're right. You can ask, but yeah, again, it's also. It doesn't hurt, but yeah, you're right. Which institution are we talking about? Yeah. Any other questions, observations? Yes.
It's just like you were saying how it's upsetting, like how horrible it is for these women, and of course it is, but what's upsetting for me is, yes, we are lucky to be studying and to come from the places and the families that we come from, but it's also upsetting that there's not one guy who cares enough to come see this, who has the same privilege, privilege as
no
we
guys
have.
in the club?
No, I don't know about you. It's
Well,
just
first,
girls.
for guyhood, I should say, I gave a lecture for women in business on Afghan women.
And there were some guys.
But what do you?
What?
Gives me so much hope for the future.
One.
Also in the title of the club, like pointing to like either girls or boys, it makes me feel a bit like they focus more on like one gender and not the other, and maybe like for boys they don't feel so included because it's like I don't know how the club is called actually. Like
What is it
someone
called?
sends me.
IE Girls Up.
Yeah, girls
Okay.
are-
The thing is, the name of the club, because Girl Up itself is another organization and we're just operating as a branch of that, so Girl Up has to be included.
Oh, no,
But then, as.
But it's sad that a boy, or even like a
but they're
lot of
always
boys
gonna
who
think that.
can't even think, okay, if it's about girls, I shouldn't really care.
Yeah, but it's like me, like a club, like to see boys. Like I don't know, like I'm not gonna.
Now.
No, but like for boys, like there's like you're not going to play with the boys in football because like it's like nails.
They also get the best timing, they get the best bus, they get the best.
Oh wow,
Wow.
issues.
Wow.
So many issues to deal with.
Yeah, so for women in business, again, one guy came. I think because his girlfriend was there. Now I'm trying to think. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So what can you do? Well, it's
That's
what
what
you
I
are
was gonna
doing.
ask.
Is to know, to be aware.
But then what to do to have more voice?
Oh, well, so
Okay, so
that's
you
it, what you
use
do,
it,
what you do with
and
your
you
knowledge,
propose.
that's up to you, you see, as agents.
I use it every day, or I
Good.
try to use it.
Yeah,
every day.
that's it, so that's the right thing to do.
But then it's always like, ugh, you get so emotional about this or blah, blah, but I'm
They tell you
wondering.
that?
Yeah, but
I
there's
feel
also
like
girls that
they
tell me
don't-
that I get too emotional about it.
No, see, that's the other thing we can do, is not be apathetic. You
Yeah.
see, to be emotional is to be not apathetic.
Yeah.
Or resign. No, then ethically, I think that's the right thing to do. That
I'm
is doing something.
Just wondering what you would suggest
You
to
see-
have these sort of clubs or
What can I
events.
tell you from people who come from the region, including myself, I come from Iraq?
Yeah.
Is that we feel it's kind of a sign of solidarity to be aware, not forgotten. I had a story not too long ago from one of my Afghan kids who's trapped in Kabul. He just got out to Pakistan. But he had a story of like a firefight, like a machine gun firefight right in front of his window. Imagine your view. And imagine what he was doing. And when he showed me that video, I said, what do you want me to do with it? He goes, post it on your Instagram account so people know what we go through. That's what they want, just empathy. They know, I mean, just that fellow students, their generation are aware of what they're going through. Think about that when you're having a bad day. What is the one thing you want? Is other people to know what you're going through, right? To feel you, to empathize. That's all they expect. Yeah, I would think, what does this Afghan girl want? And again, I think, and I don't know if she could even possibly imagine that she's been using my lesson for all these years, but just to know she's going. I mean, yeah, that's what else, that's what. Somebody once asked me, what's the point of protest? And I said, you protest because you feel it's the right thing to do. You've done something. You've not resigned yourself to the situation. It might not change anything. You do it because you think it's the right thing to do. And it's the same with this, coming to this is a form of protest, where you're protesting the public.
Yeah, it raises awareness and it calls attention. And eventually, if the attention is sufficient, and it's dealt with peacefully, or then it can actually make changes.
And who knows what position you'll be in the future. That's also the other thing. Yeah, don't sell yourself short. And who one of you in this classroom is going to make a difference. We'll be in a position to make a difference. You never know where you'll find yourself. Because at least you have the luxury of dreaming. And of course there will be the patriarchs who are going to get in the way, but at least you have the luxury of dreaming. Yes.
I do think adding on to what this girl said, that you get a not positive response, or that you don't get engagement. I think part of it is possibly also about presentation. I think even if you're passionate, you do still have to perhaps not get emotional. You have to also meet people where they are.
I don't always agree, because I think putting emotion in it shows also how much you care.
It's passion. Yeah. It's a little alienating though, I guess. If somebody comes to you with a point of view that you don't already hold, and emotionally, passionately,
I mean, I guess it's
I'm
always
gonna be
smart
more
to know your
interested.
audience.
That's true, but then exactly, but if I am listening to somebody, I'm gonna be more interested if they share their point of view with some sort of emotion to it, because otherwise, why do I know you care? Or how do I know you care?
I guess you're trying to persuade, not show that you care.
You're
I
doing
think
both.
you're showing
I
both,
think
yeah.
it'll depend. Remember when Greta, during her speech, when she said the how dare you moment, right? She was very emotional. Of course, all the anti-climate deniers were saying she was being too emotional off the hinge. But did she make an impact? Even to her detractors, she was saying, even in fact, they were detracting from her, saying she was too emotional. But the point is, she got her message across. To the point that it aggravated them.
As long as people talk about it.
It's contingent. Of course, every situation differs, but that's just one example I could think of immediately where somebody got emotional, and I think it had the impact. It's inspired her sympathizers and infuriated her detractors. Yes.
I don't know. I would argue that that's increasing polarization. Your
Yeah,
side is
in a way.
enthusiastic about it, but your detractors are angrier. So
Polarization can't help, wouldn't you say?
I would say that if you try to avoid polarization like as much as possible, sure there's some people who will never agree with you, but there's some people that maybe could become your allies in the future. You know, it's depending on how you approach them, and you should focus more on
That's
like
the goal.
consensus with them.
Yeah, it is a goal. But I'm just saying, I think polarization sometimes can help. I don't think we should always look at it as in like it's the worst thing. We see it all the time. People do stuff on purpose just to cause polarization. Yeah, because it also gets people.
And then there's, well,
whether
there's
that's
also
in a
the,
bad way or the good way. It gets people to talk about you. That's what AOC did with her groups.
well, I mean, if we look at the issue of climate change, what Greta is doing, let's look at it in terms of the policy. That speech set the agenda. It gets people talking about it, and setting the agenda is good. But at the end of the day, you're going to have policy that's made to respond to it. And of course, with any kind of policy, there's going to have to be some kind of consensus. Climate change will not be fought unless there's a consensus between the US and China. Okay, the two greatest polluters, right? So in that case, yeah, polarizing is not going to help either. Saying the US is to blame or China is to blame in that case, that's not going to help. There is going to have to be consensus, and that's going to have to be done with calm-headed policymakers on both sides. It just hasn't happened yet, you see? So it depends on where we're talking about on the political process. But at least what happened with Greta was, and remember the momentum there. Climate was set on the agenda until the pandemic came. And then it really took a step back. And I see it now coming back as an agenda.
Because it's all interconnected. You know what I mean? Like pandemics are going to become a problem if we don't address climate.
Well, okay, and that's why you're going to take my class. That's why you're taking. That's the argument of the entire class. It's all connected. Yeah, my argument
Be in
is.
your classes. Are you all fourth year?
First year.
First year?
Yeah.
Wait, what are you studying?
PPLE.
Oh, so like the whole thing, like the most complicated one.
Well, I think it's softer because it's less in depth, but
What's your name?
Sabina. You?
Valentina, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're first years too.
And we have to admit, a good number of women did not come. And that's also the other problem with patriarchy. See, patriarchy only works if women allow it to work. That's the other. Yeah, thank you for coming. Sorry for the difficulties.
It's still so interesting.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you. You're the best. Bye, Lizzie.
Hi.
If you guys have time, maybe you can go to the Girl Up website, because over there you can like register to be a member. So you click on Girl Up. And then,
I'll do from home. Sorry, I have class. Thank you so
and
much.
then, it says like
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
We did.
you don't have to start a club, but we already have our club registered, so you can come in as a member. So you click that club, you click IE Girl Up Club, and you should get
Membership or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's like news feeds and stuff, so you guys can.
That's from
The Girl Up app. That's from Girl Up itself, like
Okay,
not
okay,
from
okay.
our club. It's a platform where you can just.
the talks and IE
Yeah.
and everything.
But you definitely should find.
These are related.